Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I am still recovering, but it will not stop me from reporting to you what is the latest things happening in and around Ukraine that we should be looking out for. Let's begin. And we start with something absolutely beautiful, as we don't really report that much anymore on the strikes that Ukraine does against the Russian oil refineries. The fact of the matter is that this is almost a daily occurrence for the Russians, and we must never forget it. This type of pressure is the one that is going to help Ukraine really get Russia to finally accept the realistic terms of peace proposals on the table and not any kind of a political discussion. So more of this brings the war closer to an end. And to talk specifically about what we just saw is that the Ukrainian strikes on a seaport or oil refinery in Russia. Ukrainian drones hit Russia's Temryuk seaport in Krasnodar region and the Syzran oil refinery in Samara Oblast overnight, the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces reported. These are not the most crucial refineries or transportation hubs. Everything that we usually discuss in the southern region, around Krasnodar region and Samara, this is less to influence the situation inside Russia by itself. Beyond that, there is discussion right now on how the pressure with sanctions can be screwed up. European Union G7 countries are weighing in on how they can adapt the situation on the Russian oil price cap. As we know beforehand, the agreement was that there will be a set price for oil under which Russia will not be able to be insured when transporting Russian oil. Well, it seems that finally, I don't know why it's happening so late, but finally the realization is coming in that it should be more closer to an embargo on the Russian oil rather than an actual price cap and all of these half measures. So the group of the 7 countries and the European Union are in talks to replace a price cap on Russian oil exports with a full maritime service ban in bid to reduce the oil revenue that helped finance the Russian invasion into Ukraine. 6 sources familiar with the matter have claimed to Reuters. Russia exports over a third of its oil in Western tankers, mostly to India and China, with the use of Western shipping services. The ban would end that trade, which is mostly done through the fleets of EU maritime countries, including Greece, Cyprus, and Malta. It's a no-brainer. The question is why it hasn't been done so far. Moreover, European Union has also agreed on a package to diversify from the Russian energy sources, and the current statement is that by the end of 2027, Europe will not purchase any energy resources from Russia. Unfortunately, a couple of questions still left hanging in the air. Firstly, is that the majority of short-term contracts will be terminated. However, one question still remains unanswered by the Europeans, and I think this is just because everyone knows the answer, is that what will happen to the Russian oil and energy resources that are just imported by the third countries, refined and repackaged and sold to Europeans as a completely new product. And I think the answer is obvious both to you and me here, what exactly everyone is going to be doing. So Europeans are still not fully independent from the Russian energy resources despite everything. But with all of the discussions around the fact that Ukraine is right now under a lot of pressure, it is also important to realize that Russia is under a lot of pressure as well. Now, their campaign and politics that they're conducting are focused specifically on throwing dust into your eyes, stating that everything is fine. However, everything is not fine. This is Russian almost daily situation where massive amounts of drones are just flying and destroying many valuable targets inside Russia. It is not enough to defeat Russia on itself. Ukraine will still need to additionally supply these efforts with the performance on the front line. But Ukrainian hunts against the Russian military targets continues. This time, her Primary, which is the Phantoms unit, has reported again about the strikes inside of Crimea. Primary has been operating recently on the eastern front line in Donbass. However, they are not fully deviating from their operations in Crimea as well. And we got even more new videos of Ukrainian strikes against the Russian targets, including the MiG-29 fighter plane that got caught standing out in the open. Crimea is totally an absolute wasteland for Russia, where the resources come to get exploded, so to say. And Ukrainians are doing an amazing job at continuing their operations there. Discussions around the European loan to Ukraine backed by the Russian frozen assets continue. This week we had a lot of various development. Firstly, Friedrich Merz went to Belgium while canceling his planned trip to Norway to talk with the Belgian Prime Minister to try to convince him to release his hold and resistance on the Russian frozen assets. Beyond that, there has been now a report that United States are weighing in and stating that the European Union should not go forward with the planned reparation loan for Ukraine, and they're presenting it essentially as that these assets should be, quote unquote, bringing us closer to peace and should be used in peace negotiations with Russians. To put it in perspective, this is United States pushing for the terms that they've outlined in their 28-point plan, in which about $100 billion from these frozen Russian assets goes to United States as a payment for services that they're providing. So they're being not very transparent here, so to say, what exactly their interest is. But more importantly, it is the Europeans that are actually coming out and proposing a whole new deal for the Belgians. European Commission leader Ursula von der Leyen came out with the statements that the new deal would be about 90 billion worth and will cover about 70% of Ukrainian needs for the next years. And then it will be up to other countries, individual governments to provide the rest. And they are stating that they were taking into account every objection that Belgium was having, and that this is going to be a very nice and fair reparation deal for Ukraine. The problem here is that some news outlets reported that Hungary is blocking this, but it's important to understand that this is proposed in a mechanism that doesn't suppose unanimity. In this case, this reparation loan can be released by the European Union by voting in a qualified majority format. That means that 55% of 27 EU member states with at least 65% of EU population represented would need to vote for this to pass. So technically speaking, this can be shoved down Belgium's throat if the push comes to shove. But I don't really see Europeans doing it because we do have some sense of understanding that it would be a very, very bad precedent. In any case, Europeans are doing the best they can to provide Ukraine with the funds. And all in all, for me, it seems that we're going to come to some kind of understanding. Then basically just recently, there was a released United States National Security Plan, which is a 35-page paper describing the priorities for US security. In a nutshell, it's word for word the speech that J.D. Vance gave in Munich at the start of this year. And I will have a separate video where we're going to go in depth into it, so we're not going to talk about it now. But I want to underscore that a lot of Europeans technically already knew that this was the case. It's more gives firepower to those people rather than the people that were trying to still present that there's some kind of a still cooperation with United States possible. And I think overall it's going to come out as a net benefit for Europe as we're going to become more independent. But again, we're going to talk about it more in a separate document. But it doesn't paint United States in a very good light. It basically hands down the victory around the geopolitics to China with if any of this plan will be followed. It's really atrocious. And I want to be very clear because I have been bashing United States a little bit in the last couple of videos. I am well aware that when I'm talking about US, I'm talking talking about the current administration and the policies of certain individuals in the modern administration. I am absolutely understanding that absolute majority of people inside of United States do realize that the best thing that can happen to the world and the Pax Americana is for Ukraine to win the war against the Russians. It is to keep the mutual bonds that have connected Europe to Russia. It's the people that understand that when United States is stating that they're going to provide security for Europe, it gives them unprecedented control over the Europeans, that countries that are dependent on you security-wise will do anything that you want economy-wise. And as soon as you start breaking that bond, that's when you're going to start getting challenges also on the economic front. So I am fully aware that people of United States do realize what is happening. An absolute majority, it is now, latest poll suggests that 65% are realizing that Ukraine even must win and there should be more weapons sent to Ukraine. So even people that are at least favorable towards Ukraine, I think it's going to go way, way, way up. It is really fantastic the amount of support there is from the people of United States. Thank you so much. And we're going to get through this one way or another. And talking about support, I obviously must mention our current fundraiser that is run for the Black Raven Battalion of the 93rd Brigade. We are doing fantastically well. We're almost 60,000 in 3 weeks. That is way above my expectations. The good news is that we need to know here is that every 20,000 that we gather, essentially, there will be a new batch released of drones to the front lines. So guys, please participate, support the fundraiser. It is the best way that we can help Ukraine right now. And remember, if you're in the United States, Artwine has reached out to me with a proposal that they will contribute to fundraiser from the each sold bottle or a package of bottles that you can buy. Unfortunately, it's a sparkling wine from Ukraine, but it is available only in the United States. We are looking for options in Canada and other places in the world, including Europe as well. And just to quickly reiterate, right now Zelensky is holding multiple days talks with Witkoff and Kushner. With regards to the peace plan, there's rumors that land is being discussed. I want to reiterate that Ukraine will not accept a bad deal. There are principles that Ukraine will not break. Those are that the armed forces of Ukraine are the only security guarantee for Ukraine. Ukraine will most likely not allow anything to happen to restrict their armed forces. And secondly, Ukraine is absolutely rock solid that they will not be withdrawing from any territories and giving Russia anything. Other than that, I think Ukraine is looking for a best possible deal. But again, I think that this mostly is a distraction and there is no deal on the table because Russians will not accept it. There is more good news in Ukraine from the anti-corruption front. Government official lawmaker from the parliament of Ukraine has been caught demanding bribes by the anti-corruption agency. This is fantastic news. Every time you see these news, Western media starts panicking and saying, oh my God, there is corruption in Ukraine. And people in Ukraine are saying, yeah, finally some fighting against corruption. So it's very interesting to see how we deviate. I just wanted to know that there is more anti-corruption work is happening in Ukraine, and Ukrainians are receiving this extremely well, and it lifts up a lot of their fighting spirits. Big and important package of changes addressing the situation of mobilization and contract soldiers in Ukraine has now been passed by the legislature in Ukraine. This law guarantees some very important points that have been discussed. Is that now people entering contractual obligation with the armed forces of Ukraine will have a separate period in which they will be considered a fighting force, after which they will have at least 1 year of non-mobilization. There is an additional benefits with regarding getting the medical assistance, and more importantly, it outlines very strictly the terms in which this contract is valid, providing protection from mobilization by the end of this contract. So, for example, if someone signs a contract for 2 years, fights for 2 years, he cannot be mobilized right after the contract ends, essentially preventing him from leaving this army. This addresses one of the most important issues in the Ukrainian military, which is the terms of service, because soldiers on the front line, they have been complaining a lot that they don't know for how long they will need to fight, when their contract will end, and will they just be staying in the military for at some point. Zelensky just says that it's enough now. Now, with them signing the contract, they will have very strict law proposed terms in which they will be serving the armed forces of Ukraine, and after which they will have the protection from mobilization, and they will also receive the proper pay and all of the other benefits, including the ability to choose your own units and other things. This is the first very important step in changing the Ukrainian military force. And we're finishing today on a frustrating news, is that International Olympic Committee, International Skating Union, also FIFA, and other sports organizations, they're basically lifting their bans on Russia. Russia has not been prosecuted for the war crimes why they were kicked out in the first place. A lot of the Russian athletes are still fully supporting the Russian state and the Russian atrocities of their military. Russia continues conducting war crimes daily, every single day. Yet it seems that after 3 years, a lot of our sports organizations kind of feels like, yeah, it's enough. Let's get back that Russian money flowing into our pockets, because otherwise, how can we function without condemning the Russian athletes that are supporting the military advances of their armed forces? It's an absolutely atrocious situation, and it's just, once again, me holding a mirror to the world, asking, is this the world that you thought you were living in? Fucking disgrace. I love you guys. Slava Ukraini. Trust in Ukraine. Trust, support Ukrainian armed forces, and I will see you next time.